Morning, everyone. My name's Claire. I'm the director of Brisbane-based architecture practice 5 Mile Radius. I'm coming to you today from my house in sunny Brisbane. Thanks again to the guys at Design Speaks and to John and Peter for putting together such a strong lineup for today's conference. I'm only speaking today for about 25 minutes, so I will get into it with some of our ideas from the Fringe. Giving away my slides there. So 5 Mile Radius. I mean, the name 5 Mile Radius is about a call to use local materials. It was something that Gandhi preached to his countrymen to try and use their local materials so that they'd, kind of preserve the regional styles of India, and then also, try and not exploit resources from distant planets, distant places. And look, we aren't particularly strict with, exactly 5 miles or 8 kilometers if you use the metric system, which we do. But at the time that I read about Gandhi's philosophy, it was just so instrumental in kind of setting some parameters through which, to design. I was coming from the background of like quite a commercial, international kind of experience, and where we seemed to be sort of buying materials from whatever looked best on Pinterest. And at the time, it just seemed really kind of inspiring creative constraint, really, to look more closely at what we have around us. So yeah, some of the work that I'm going to talk you through today is, well, most of it is more, I guess, urban focused and looking predominantly at the use of construction waste as a building material. And I think that's the product of the environment where we're living. We've certainly done work before, which is more in a rural context, which is certainly more with, low carbon and renewable materials. So there's a range of, different approaches to materiality that we like to explore as a practice. And another thing about us is we like making. So I guess another really kind of inspired moment for me was reading about Studio Mumbai, an architecture practice from India, in a book, an El Croquesse, that my friend Liam gave me. And there I saw this picture of an architecture desk looking at a carpentry workshop, and then on the left there, that's some of the prototyping. So Studio Mumbai had a setup at the time where the architects were drawing things and then they were getting mocked up at 1:1. And I think just coming off the back of sort of the desk-bound Revit lifestyle of a younger graduate, I just thought that this looked like the idea of an architectural mecca. And I traveled to India and saw this workshop, didn't work there, but I guess that was at a time also very influential. And so, we've now had a series of workshops as a practice. The first is that one on the left, probably the best one. We built that ourselves using materials we got from Gumtree. And yeah, look, it was very shoddily put together, but that was a little shed that was on the side of a much larger brass foundry in Red Hill. And then, sometime a few years ago, we started this sort of concrete hustle, which I think a lot of people actually know the practice for now, more so than our design work, which is fine. We make a product called Waste Terrazzo as part of our sort of product line, which uses all the overpour concrete. So the concrete that's left in the line or that there's too much of following a pour, and we use that wet and we make terrazzo. So that has kind of been, I guess, an entrepreneurial background, entrepreneurial kind of backdrop to the studio. And we certainly needed a larger workshop, and at this middle one, Urban Arts Projects adopted us a few years ago and let us, expand our concrete empire. And now we, lease a larger warehouse in Yeronga in an old Tormans paint factory. And, this shed is going to be knocked down in about 5 years, which makes our rent about half of market value. And there's a degree of lawlessness there, which suits our practice well. So I'll launch right into it, apparently. I'm going to talk you through 3 projects today, and that are more, as I said, more waste focused and recent. And they're definitely smaller acts. I think the theme of the conference today was that, these smaller acts can add up to, a greater whole. And so these are kind of in motion smaller acts, I guess. There's our first project, 444 Queen Street. So on the left, that's a building that was designed 46 years ago by Peddlethorpe and Harvey. And it's actually a great building in that it's got a really simple concrete structure to it, and that's made it great for an adaptive reuse project. So Fender Katsoulides has designed a wonderful revamp of this old girl, and it's going to have a new facade and a new lease on life, retaining the primary structure, which is very exciting. So Hutchinson's Builders have been engaged to do as the lead contractor, and they're sort of in a process, they've finished it now, of stripping out all the floors. So you can see on the left what it's they're stripping it out to, and on the right that's kind of what they're presented with prior to demolition. So you can see that just a lot of stuff's been left over from previous tenancies, and some of it's not that old. So Hutchie's got us in and said, what would you guys be interested in doing with this stuff? And we said, look, we don't know, but we've got an arts project coming on board to present an artwork for a gallery, artisans in Fortitude Valley. And I also had a few students from Bond University joining the semester. So we decided that we'd make this a bit of a self-initiated prototype of a larger process about reworking some of these existing materials. So our first step is always to go on site, and it was really interesting to see understand the demolition process through the eyes of the builder and also through the eyes of the demolition contractor as tech, and find out what people are interested in, which is the prized room of copper. Like, that door was very heavily locked. And so people value certain materials, but they certainly don't value others. And one of the key things to understand from this process is that the separation of waste, which happens during demolition, is quite limited, because there isn't that, in this case, there's very limited space on the ground floor for various types of skips. So when they come through, they're cutting legs off desks, they're throwing everything all together, and there's no attempt to deconstruct. It really is more of an attempt to kind of bash and grab. So the Bond students were let loose there for a day, where they cased the joint. And as part of that, we took a whole lot of stuff back to our workshop. This is just a little bit of a sort of note about what happens in resource recovery today. I thought some people might be interested. So particularly in Queensland, a waste levy was introduced that in 2017, I think, that essentially just made the cost of landfilling astronomically more expensive. That meant that the resource recovery, which is the idea of a skip being separated, sorted and recovered, is now something that you see more and more of. It's a very complex kind of process. And so when you go to this resource recovery yard, which we went to with the students, you can see the skip arrives. It's a hot mess. And they essentially kind of sort it into its waste. Nothing here is really, it's all downcycled essentially. So you start off with something like the hardwood, like none of the hardwoods are ever recovered. They're always sort of left and then mulched, and that becomes a fertilizer. Masonry waste, as I'm sure many of you know, concrete, brick, it is all recoverable. It's then crushed, the steel is taken out of it, and then it's a road base essentially. So it's still a much lower value material than the original. And a softwood waste, again, I think it's turned into making fertilizers, and gypsum is recycled. It's pretty tricky. I think it's because there's so often so much stuff stuck to plasterboard, etc., that it makes that separation kind of complicated. But yeah, really interested in the processes and what the industry is doing. Obviously, the big shifts we need to happen at that industrial scale. So the students made this great list, which was awesome, of, how many square meters, say 600 square meters of carpet, and then, what happened to it. It's ripped up and sent to mixed landfill. And, the desktop sent to resource recovery and then shipped, and the steel is sent to the metal recycler. And yeah, so I think that's good just from a quantitative kind of way for students to understand, the sort of cradle to cradle, cradle to grave aspect of their work. We worked then back at the workshop, playing around. And the students were very obsessed with these fluoro lights from the ceiling, and sort of turning it into various forms of rave cave at the workshop, which is, fine by me. But we did lots of prototyping testing. We made some concrete tabletops and tried them on legs that we'd recovered in various capacities, and used timber to try and get it up to the right height to be more of a dining table. So just trying to find furniture lines and stuff that we could invent that were looked at the materials in different ways. Looking at reconfiguring some of the wall shelving to make the wall pockets, that's what we call them. And here's the finished product. So the lights that you can see at the top there were recovered. The red is from desk dividers that we then repurposed to create the disco light. The seats are made out of shelving. We use the stud walls to make the bases, and the hooks and aluminium end caps from the desk. The wall pockets were shelves with the triangular bracket was used to hold up a different type of shelf, and then the felt was again a desk divider. I guess the chair, everything here is very much a prototype, but I guess it's kind of step one of a longer process. We've got some time, being that the building's only just getting on site now. So this chair was made out of the partitions from the walls that were demolished, and we just charred this because it's a quick process for us to do that. But now we actually have an increased capacity to joint and relaminate timbers in our workshop. So the better version of this, and we are working on a furniture range which really uses lots of just structural stud. We could finish this. We'll finish this to a nicer degree, I guess, is all I'm saying. Could look better. But the whole thing is a piece of Japanese joinery that kind of clicks in. So thanks to the brilliance of Jack in the workshop, and you can kind of slide that bottom member out, the sort of mortise and tenon legs lock on, and the whole thing becomes rigid. More photos of the chairs. And there's another just sort of grab of the exhibition, and having a good time. So the students made these handouts that explained the history of the building, which is always important to kind of know, to set the context, and then also the sort of handouts that describe to people what was happening at the resource recovery level. And so the next part of that project is we are now hoarding everything. We are good at that, and as the project evolves, we then can develop the furniture range and kind of sell it back to the builder, the designer, for reuse in that project, or certainly just turn it into something that can be used for something else. Like, I don't think from a carbon perspective that you need to necessarily reuse materials in the exact site that they came from, but if you're using them locally, that's probably fine, being that we've already moved them to the workshop to actually work on them. But like from an emotional point of view, and to actually find ways to connect with our built environment, we kind of think there is something there. I'm just going to do a little bit of a side jump here. I always got to throw in a weird travel story. So here we are in Joshua Tree, in this, California, on a sort of summer's afternoon, and I spent some time there on a fellowship which was looking more at earth construction and trying to use local earth as a viable housing material, and that's something super passionate about. But in this case, I was just also really inspired by the amount of dirt and waste and things. I think that's a doll on the top right, and that we found on our travels, and that brings me to this guy, Noah Purifoy. I wonder if anyone's heard of him. He's an African American. He was born in Alabama in 1917, and he was a sculpture artist. They call him assemblage artist, in that he assembled different things, predominantly waste, and made these large scale artworks that were about bigger global kind of issues. And this is what he made. He moved out to the desert due just to rising costs of living in LA. And for the last 15 years of his life, he built himself the Outdoor Museum of Assemblage. And this is my idea of heaven. I like the desert aspect for some reason, but also just that he really kind of went for it. So the entire, that you can go visit, it's a museum. Everything there is made out of stuff that he found in the desert. And it's some sort of, it's assemblage art. It's kind of, to me, just a great story. I don't necessarily understand that, need to take from this is architecture that, with a capital A, but what it is sort of a joyful creation. It sort of reminds me of another Indian movement called Judgard, which is kind of the idea that of, you know, making good with something that wasn't meant for that use. And here you see, you know, the rich compositions that Purifoy kind of manages to bring to light, and always with meaning, because this thing is linked to this idea of it being this, you know, local waste that was found that had no other use, and now it's kind of given a higher purpose through its reassembling. Adrian's Little Theatre, just thought this is a fun building. It's all made out of steel of various gauges, and sort of sits in the middle of its desert context. There's this kind of cube that then has the most brilliant quality of light inside. Like, oof, isn't that spectacular? And, you know, if you get down to it, I wrote down everything that's in this building: car tires, toilet seats, glass blocks, old windows, balding wire, plywood, metal pipe, sneakers, bicycles, mannequins, cathode rays, shopping cart handles, and umbrella spines. And so, I like the Joshua Tree Desert, and I had a nice time visiting this. And sometimes I just put this up because I think even in the next project, which I'll go into, we do actually feel like our work is kind of this assembling of just stuff that we can get our hands on. This is a commercial office fit out in West End that we completed at the start of this year. It was the first project back that we kicked off. And this is the interior design, and then also the fabrication was undertaken by our studio. And, you know, we wouldn't normally do a sort of a kitchen and bathroom kind of fit out, which is what the brief was here, but it had this great laneway that opens up, this great roller door. It used to be a hat factory that opens up into the laneway, and this is the view on the left is from within the office, and that sort of door is over there within a storage cabinet, and it was very dark, and, you know, the black and white photo is making it look better than it potentially felt. It's all south facing, so we decided that actually this was a civic project and that door and that laneway could really, you know, engage with the street and provide ventilation and light for the office. Materials are the first thing then that, you know, we did some concept design and planning and kind of vibey rendery things to show, you know, the spatial direction. But, you know, we actually, it's not until you know exactly what material you're working with that you can really launch into any kind of detailed design. In this instance, we sort of had three heroes, I guess. One being, you know, timber, recycled wood. Didn't invent that, but it's, you know, something that we love to use. And in this case, we were lucky enough to get a whole lot of Oregon VJs that needed a bit of work, but we just we, you know, thicknessed and jointed them and laminated them. The metal in the middle, like water fine, these are $20 each of these cubes, and it's all steel SHS 30 by 30 and great, strong, lightweight material that can be cut and welded, and that's what we did. We just used that in a myriad of ways. And then the concrete that we use for bench tops and stuff is all, again, this overpour, this wet waste. And so that's kind of that view now from the office as you kind of look out towards the south. And the idea with it was to, you know, try and get as much light and ventilation into the space and make it somewhere that, you know, the staff can enjoy working in. So we made all the components there. The table is, again, that steel, which we just painted, and the timber is top is all the Oregon. The cabinetry was existing. There are shelves that they had, so we made a bench top and frame to suit that. The sink's obviously a reclaimed concrete sink that had a base made. And so the bathroom, we sort of reconfigured the plan, and at the moment the bathroom's kind of in there. I didn't really describe it where it was before, but there was kind of this pokey awkward situation where the toilet door opened out onto a common space. So instead now you go around the other way and into the bathroom. There's just a light box there because there was bit of a windows in the bathroom that we wanted to bring through, and the roller door is, you know, up there. So you just, at the end of the night, you just drop the roller door and go home. And that's kind of how it feels from the outside. Lightweight frame made out of, you know, the SHS, the timber deck. The Ampolite is a concession. So I guess I spent a long time this year looking for secondhand polycarbonate, and it's hard to find. That maybe says a bit about its ongoing value and ability to kind of be recovered at the end of a project's life. And I'm actually kicking myself here because I don't know why I didn't just ask Ampolite for their offcuts, because we've got nothing there that's above 800 anyway. But that, you know, that anyway, that is a concession, and that's kind of one thing we do have to occasionally go, we need to be on site, this thing needs, and so we bought that. But it's a nice kind of way to engage the street. So there's that kind of steel, and the steel's all just, you know, we just weld it in the most simple way we kind of can down the workshop. This was luckily all the display racking already had was already set up as wall stripping, so we had gal brackets made out of the excess from gal laser cutting sheets, and that worked out, you know, reasonably well. The curtain I stole from my lounge room because it matched the pink curtain that I had in the renders, and I don't need a curtain in my lounge room. The brackets are, yeah, folded metal. There's some details, like there's a chair that sits along there, and we just made the chair the same way, just with the brackets and some storage under the seat. I mean, and just bracing ply that we had rolling around to make that box. Concrete, yeah, so you know, that's the easiest concrete finish we can do. We just make an off-form box and pour the waste concrete and whatever kind of reinforcing we can kind of piece together. Works out fine. Outside views, bit of greenery, engaging with the street once again. And I mean, where I think Jack photographed this, he was in a garden, but once you're down on the street, there's a fairly high degree of privacy there. And so at nighttime, the idea is it becomes a bit of a lantern, and you can sort of have a bit of a vibey party, but it's really hard. You can't get into there from the street. So you've got a high degree of security as an office. And the third project's a bit of fun. The AESOP, don't know, AESOP probably is how I'd say it. They came to us looking for a window display that would help launch this parsley seed antioxidant facial treatment, which essentially is for removing the impurities of the city from your face. Probably not that relevant to people that live in Hobart, but their brief was sort of this Besser block idea, but you need to kind of take it to somewhere relevant to your location. One of the shops, we were doing a range of shops, and one of our concept initially was to really lean into the Pacific Fair shopping centre where we were working. And there they had these, it's a kind of postmodern mess there, and we sort of proposed these tutti frutti pink blocks. We've done a lot of experimentation with pigmenting concrete with various oxides that we sort of get from brick factories as seconds, and so we kind of took back to AESOP, and they said, great, but we're not into your pink. So anyway, off we go. This is where we ended up taking it, which is to I think we kind of extrapolated that postmodern idea and thought, well, what kind of materials were around there? And one of them was curvy corro, and the master of curvy corro is a man called Russell Hall. He runs a factory called Ripple Iron, which is about 3 minutes away from the workshop. And he has got this factory where, as you can imagine, there is a lot of rippled iron. He buys sheets from Laserlight and Lysart, sorry, and rolls them into it's sort of like a mini orb, but it's ripple iron and it's stronger, and he can use thicker profiles, and he can ripple anything. So if anyone's after any interesting steel material, I can guarantee you that Russell can do it. And he's also trying to get rid of everything, so you should go buy his stuff. And we just sort of thought, the idea of the ripple iron, I should say, is that, you know, it forms an interlocking block. So if you've got concrete as an interlocking block, you can use the ripple iron and they will stack. So we had these blocks of various corresponding sizes that, you know, should allow them to be stacked in a range of ways. We did, and then we just poured that with our waste concrete. And as we did it, we added in a whole lot of different oxides and tests. So at that stage, I mean, we've improved this process a bit. We were literally asking concrete. We knew we'd get a hookup from a builder or from a concrete pumpy, and then we'd show up and we'd just get them to empty the whatever they had left into the back of our ute. And some prototypes there of how that sort of came together. And, you know, this is Hunter and Jack from the studio, just really getting into the art of placing random concrete blocks in an ASOP facade. And, you know, the plinthy ground there was formed of crushed masonry aggregates, and we kind of certainly added oxides and waste and messed around with some to see what we could do. Finished product, there we are. ASOP was pretty happy with it. I think we kind of, so we did this in 3 stores. And some of the blocks that have the texture and patina of them to them were kind of the most successful. And I guess here is some more detail shots of how that kind of came together. There we go. And I think this is kind of where I'm going to leave it. I mean, 5 mile radius is, I guess, comes from being interested in architecture, which has a respect for the materials we use. And some of our heroes are people like, you know, Carlos Scarpa, who could use a stone almost with, you know, a godlike purpose that would kind of, you know, deliver it to the heavens. And I think that's still relevant. What we kind of are struggling with a little bit, or well, not struggling, but just kind of thinking about is like almost the way you dignify a material in today's day and age, and certainly a new one or an extracted resource, is just by leaving it alone and not doing anything. You know, the act of architecture somehow feels somewhat savage now, given what we know. But the joy of it and the expression and you know what you can do if you're ethical or concerned about where things come from is not limited. And there's a range of different ways that we can kind of continue to explore what's in play or what's renewable, I think, to kind of get to continue the craft and the art of the profession. Thank you.